What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you my ban list predictions for the January 2019 format. Yes, that's right. We're actually scheduled to get a ban list at a time no sooner than January 21st, 2019. Now, obviously we could get that well into February, but I want to make sure I got my predictions out there of what I think we should be changing for this format, because when you look at what's to come, we have Savage Strike, which may not have like the biggest impact on the game. We're not really getting any major archetypes, but we're bolstering some of the best decks. But then we also have the Soul Burner structure deck with stuff like Salamangreat, which could have a big impact, and possibly Infinity Chasers if some of those archetypes could be ridiculous, which, being a deck builder set where something like Sky Strike or Necros have came out of, that's a very good possibility. But before we get into it, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you guys don't miss a single upload. And if you really love the content that I produce on this channel, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because it's thanks to the continued support of each and every one of my patrons, as well as YouTube channel members, that I'm able to bring you this content on a daily basis. So if you're interested, hit the join button down below or check out the links in the description. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So starting off with the banned cards, the first card I have is Topologic Gumblar Dragon. Now, I feel like Gumblar really has to go, even though it's not necessarily the highest priority target, because yes, it was much more problematic before when Warrior decks and Danger Dark Warrior decks were just running rampant. That doesn't mean it's a card that still doesn't need to be addressed. I mean, having your entire hand looped for 6 cards, meaning you start the game with nothing, isn't exactly fun and interactive. And I think the problem is, especially since extra linking is a staple mechanic of the game now, anytime there's going to be an archetype that can extra link your opponent with these, going to Gumblar Dragon is going to be a guarantee, because yeah, if I can hand loop my opponent in addition to extra linking them, why wouldn't I just play Gumblar in addition to whatever deck that may be? I really feel like it just kind of hinders the potential card design for the future, especially with extra links or even just link monsters in general. But then there's also the fact that, look at hand looping's history. I mean, we no longer have stuff like wind up hand loop, so that's not allowed to exist. You know, cards like Psyframe Lord Omega are limited to 1 because they were abused by plenty of decks that were hand looping with that. So why is it okay for Gumblar to exist? That's kind of the reasoning why I feel like this card should go, and I feel like a lot of people would agree with me to that sense. Now, moving on, we have another card, speaking of the Warrior decks, that definitely should get banned, and that is number 86, Rongominiad. Now, I know a lot of people might say, well, why don't you just ban Gossip Shadow? Well, Gossip Shadow isn't exactly the problem here, because if another deck comes along that's able to summon Rongominiad with 1,000,000 materials, then people are going to find a way to play it and abuse it as much as possible, and we're going to be back at square one. Yes, while Gossip Shadow does enable the Rongominiad degeneracy, it doesn't exactly get at the core issue. Gossip Shadow is actually pretty cool on its own for what it's worth, and I'd like to see it integrated into other strategies, but again, Rongominiad's a card I think no one is really happy to play against. You can't normal summon or special summon if it has 4 materials, it nukes the board with 5, and then with 3, it's unaffected by all card effects. So it's like, yeah, you can still technically play, but you can't really remove this card off the field. Just card design wise, it's something that we really don't want to see in the game anymore moving forward, especially at the higher tiers of competitive play. So I'm perfectly okay if this card gets banned. Now, another card I am perfectly okay with getting banned, and probably a card that out of all the cards on this list should probably get hit more than anything, Summon Sorceress. Summon Sorceress is just like the biggest enabler of bullshit that I have ever seen. I mean, it's basically generic, and especially with a card like Reaper Docus, it basically makes it so that in any deck, you're able to just summon Reaper Docus, use its effect to make something else the same type. Oh look, now you have Summon Sorceress access. That seems pretty good, right? Any card that can just special summon something right out of the deck is just crazy. It just allows you to extend your play so much further, and you see in a majority of the decks that Summon Sorceress is played, it's usually degenerate stuff like FTKs or extra link strategies, and yeah, sure, you see it pop up in other decks here and there. That doesn't exactly give it the right to exist in the game. Not to mention, if we do ever get Crystron Needle Fiber in the TCG, these two cards cannot coexist in the same format because that's just going to take the level of degeneracy to a completely new degree that I want no part of. So I definitely think it's Summon Sorceress's time to go. I think it's a very fair hit because honestly this card is just way too powerful, and while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just there's kind of the point where it's just way too powerful to exist in the game. Now another card for the ban list is kind of one that I've been advocating for quite some time, and that is Soul Charge. You know, Soul Charge is just one of the most bullshit cards ever printed. Yeah, it was printed back in a time where the game was much slower, but it's just a card that wins you games you realistically have no right winning. Think of the dynamic this card creates. I mean, realistically, you can just throw all your resources at your opponent just mindlessly, and then, oh, you just Soul Charge them all back by paying 4,000 life points, even 5,000, and then you just won the game because your opponent ran out of resources. Like, one card should not be able to generate a +4 on its own. I just think that's completely ridiculous. And yeah, so what if you don't have a battle phase? You can just set up soft locks, or you can extra link your opponent, or you can just hand loop them. Like, there's so many crazy card effects now that Soul Charge has just gotten so powerful, and like, I can't even imagine if this card was anything greater than 1, but the fact that we have danger decks that are able to cycle through their entire deck to draw this card almost every single game, yeah, it's just Soul Charge's time to go. I think it's perfectly justified, but we do not need a card like this existing in our game. Now, last but not least for the ban list, we have a card that kind of got overlooked, but that doesn't mean it's something that still shouldn't be addressed, and that's Galaxy Tomahawk. Now, we've seen Galaxy Tomahawk appear in the Danger Dark World FTK as one of the main enablers, and what was I just saying about one card not being able to generate like +4 advantage on its own? Yeah, this card pretty much does exactly that. I mean, just being able to spam tokens, which then turn into link monsters for basically free, it's just ridiculous. Now, it's a little bit less generic than something like Soul Charge, because you do have to be playing level 7s, but oh, guess what? Danger Nessie's a level 7, Danger Dogman's a level 7, so basically if your deck can incorporate dangers, you can almost play Galaxy Tomahawk. Not to mention, if your deck already has level 7s naturally in the archetype, like say something like Spiral, it makes it even easier for you to play something like this. Now, obviously Spiral isn't exactly like prolific by any means, but it doesn't justify that the card should not be hit. I feel like cards like this definitely need to be addressed, because anytime in the future we get level 7s back into the game, you're gonna think to yourself, well, can I make Galaxy Tomahawk with this? And that's probably not the best idea, considering the amount of just absurd advantage this card generates, which is usually done in a very degenerate fashion. So I think that card is well deserving of being on the ban list. Now, moving on to the limited list, I actually don't have too many cards on here because I want to reiterate, with Savage Strike coming out, we're just really bolstering some of the best decks right now, like Altergeist Thunder Dragon. We're not really bringing new archetypes into the game, but later on we have the Soulburner structure deck and Salamangrates, and then we have Infinity Chasers, which might have a broken archetype. Remember, Sky Strikers and Necros came out in deck building sets, so it's very likely that we could get something crazy in there. So I feel like if we keep some of these decks in check, but you know, don't just ban them outright, let's reevaluate after a few months and see where the format is at. So with that said, I have Sky Striker Ace Kagari at 1. This by no means makes the deck dead, it just kind of cuts off the central point of recursion that the deck has, and I think that's really good because it basically means you can double up on all of your Sky Striker effects without having any other cards. I mean, if you have one copy of Engage, it's like you essentially have 2, and that's a little bit nutty considering these cards don't have once per turn clauses. Sky Striker would be perfectly fine with a single Kagari, it just makes it so they have to be much more cognizant of when they want to use it, and they can also use stuff like Hercules base to help recycle it. It's not like the deck doesn't have means of being able to recycle outside of Kagari. In addition to that though, I also have Gold Sarcophagus. Now this is obviously taking a hit at Thunder Dragon, being one of their key consistency cards, but the thing is though, when Gold Sarcophagus went to 1 in the OCG, Thunder Dragon started to fall by the wayside, but it didn't go completely out of favor, and with Salamangrates right around the corner, another deck that heavily relies on searching, I don't think we should be hitting Thunder Dragon too hard, because having Thunder Dragon as a natural check and balance to Salamangrate might be good for the format. Otherwise, Salamangrate and Sky Striker could probably just run rampant. I think that that's kind of okay, just kind of hitting at their consistency just a bit so that it's still playable, but it's not, you know, just as strong as it currently is. Because obviously, as we've seen in the past couple events, Thunder Dragons are just going on a tear, and it's definitely something that should be hit in some form or another. Now, you guys know I absolutely despise the semi-limited list. I feel like it's completely extraneous and irrelevant except for like a very few narrow instances, but I actually put a couple of cards on here because, again, I feel like we should just curb the power of some of these top decks, see what happens and reevaluate in a couple months once we have the next few big sets released. So with that in mind, I have Altergeist Multifaker on here. Now, Altergeist Multifaker going to 2 doesn't really do a whole lot. It definitely hits at the consistency of the deck's win condition, but you've got Pot of Indulgence coming out in Savage Strike, which is a very good boost to the deck. So it's kind of like, you know, exchanging one thing for another, and I think that's perfectly acceptable because it makes Altergeist very playable while just slightly hitting at their consistency. And then lastly, I have Sky Striker Engage as well as Widow Anchor going to 2 as well. This is something that Japan also did, and frankly, again, it doesn't make Sky Striker unplayable, especially in tandem with one Kagari. You still got plenty of search power, you still have access to using Widow Anchor for both effect negation and more offensive capabilities. I just think ultimately, if you kind of just reduce the number of copies available to the players, it just makes the deck a little bit more fair and allows the other decks, you know, like Trickstar, like Pendulum, like Burning Abyss, to just have a slightly better chance to help compete and allow these other tier 2 strategies to move up, make the meta a little bit more diverse. We would just have to see what people come up with. But ultimately, the decks are still playable. I'm not trying to crucify them. I just want to help curb their power to kind of just rein them in a little bit. And last but not least, we have the unlimited cards. And honestly, I could do an entire video about how many cards could come off of the Forbidden and Limited list, like Shuret of the Necros. I mean, sure, it's at 3 in Japan and the deck does virtually nothing. You've got El Shaddoll Construct. Like, let people play Shaddoll Fusion in the side deck with Construct. That would just be so much fun. The card is not overpowered. It's not Duelist Alliance format anymore. Just let people have some fun with it. I mean, we've got stuff like Chaos Emperor Dragon, which now has an errata, and who knows if it's going to come off the list or not, because it's one of those weird things that Konami like may never take off the list for some stupid reason. But ultimately, there's plenty of cards that could come off. I could just spend another hour talking about that. So guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about what cards you feel should be addressed in the upcoming ban list. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you really found this video insightful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.